The room fell silent the moment she walked in. A young black woman, her worn shoes scuffing the marble floor, stepped nervously into the vast, glass-walled office of one of the city's most powerful businessmen, Richard Thornton, a billionaire known for his arrogance as much as his success. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a crumpled folder, her mother's job application. Richard leaned back in his chair, his diamond cufflinks glinting in the afternoon sun. Beside him sat his team, a group of executives in sharp suits, their eyes filled with condescension. They weren't expecting her, just another face from a low-income background trying to ask for help. "Mr. Thornton," she began softly, "my mother applied for the cleaning job. She's been waiting for weeks, and we never got a reply." "I just wanted to," Richard chuckled, interrupting her. "You came here yourself for a cleaning job? That's cute." A few quiet laughs echoed around the table. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she kept her eyes steady. "She's worked hard her entire life," the girl said, her voice trembling but strong. "She just wants a chance." Richard glanced at his assistant, smirking. "Do you know how many people beg for jobs here every day? Tell you what, let's make it interesting." He leaned forward, his cold blue eyes locking onto hers. "We have a meeting in 10 minutes with Chinese investors. Our translator canceled last minute. If you can translate for me, perfectly, I'll hire your mother on the spot. If not," he paused, a cruel smile forming, "you can leave quietly, and don't come back." The room broke into murmurs, her heart raced. "Sir, I'm not scared," he taunted. "I didn't think you'd actually do it. I was only joking, but fine. Let's see if you can keep up." Laughter filled the room, but she didn't laugh. She looked down at her trembling hands, then took a deep breath. "I'll do it," she said quietly. The laughter stopped. 10 minutes later, the Chinese investors arrived, a group of serious-looking men in tailored suits. They sat across from Richard and his team, exchanging polite nods. The young woman, whose name was Maya, stood behind them, her heart pounding in her chest. Richard started the meeting with his usual arrogance, flashing his charm. "Gentlemen, welcome. I'm sure we can make a deal that benefits both sides." One of the investors, Mr. Liang, smiled politely and spoke rapidly in Mandarin. The executives looked lost. Richard turned to Maya, mocking. "Go on, translator. Tell me what he said." Maya froze. All eyes were on her. Her mother's tired face flashed in her mind, working late nights, coughing over old mops, whispering that someday Maya would make something of herself. Then she exhaled. And when she opened her mouth, fluent Mandarin flowed effortlessly. "Mr. Liang said he's honored to be here and hopes this partnership will be based on trust and mutual respect." The entire room fell silent. Richard's smirk vanished. "You speak Mandarin?" Maya nodded. "And Cantonese," she added softly. The investor's eyes lit up. Mr. Liang leaned forward, clearly impressed. "Your pronunciation is excellent," he said in Mandarin. "Did you study in China?" Maya smiled shyly and responded fluently, "Yes, sir. My mother worked 3 jobs so I could study abroad. I wanted to learn languages to help people like her communicate better." Richard blinked in disbelief. For the first time, he had nothing to say. The meeting continued, and Maya translated every word, precise, confident, and graceful. She didn't just repeat the language, she understood the tone, the emotions, the intent behind every phrase. When Richard made his sales pitch, she softened his sharp tone into something more diplomatic. When the investors expressed concern, she conveyed it with empathy, making both sides feel understood. By the end of the hour, the investors were smiling, shaking hands, and agreeing to a deal worth millions. As the meeting ended, Mr. Liang turned to Richard and said in English, "Your translator is remarkable. She made this deal possible." Richard forced a smile, glancing nervously at his board members. He could feel their silent judgment. The same people who had laughed now watched him squirm. When the investors left, Maya picked up her bag quietly. "Thank you for letting me try," sir," she said, turning to leave, but Richard stood abruptly. "Wait." She turned back, her heart pounding again that he cleared his throat awkwardly. "You said your mother applied for a cleaning job?" "Yes, sir." He hesitated, then said, "Forget that. I'm offering you a position here. Executive translator. Full salary, benefits. You start Monday." Maya blinked in disbelief. "Sir, I only came for my mother's." Richard held up a hand. "And she'll have a job too. Not as a cleaner. She can work in our staff cafeteria, comfortable hours, good pay." Tears filled Maya's eyes. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll take it," Richard said with a faint smile. "You earned it." For the first time, there was no arrogance in his voice, only respect. Maya nodded slowly, whispering, "Thank you." But what she didn't see was how deeply this moment affected Richard. After she left, he sat at his desk, staring out at the skyline. He remembered something he hadn't thought about in years, his own mother. She'd been a waitress, working long hours just to keep food on the table. He'd promised himself he'd never be poor again. But somewhere along the way, he'd learned to look down on people who reminded him of where he came from. He realized now, that girl had more dignity in her silence than he had in all his wealth. That night, Maya went home and burst into tears as she told her mother everything. Her mother, an older woman with gentle eyes and hands hardened by years of work, covered her mouth in disbelief. "He said what?" she gasped. Maya laughed through her tears. "He offered you a job too. Not cleaning, something easier, Mom. We'll finally be okay." Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "I told you, baby. God sees everything." Days passed. When Maya started her new job, the same executives who had once laughed at her now greeted her with respect. She carried herself with quiet confidence, always remembering the path that brought her there. Richard often stopped by her office. At first, it was to discuss translation needs, but soon, it became more than that. He began asking her opinion on cultural decisions, language campaigns, and eventually, moral ones. One afternoon, after a long meeting, he said softly, "You know, you taught me something that day." Maya looked up curiously. "What's that?" "That real intelligence isn't about education or money. It's about empathy." She smiled gently. "Maybe you just needed to hear someone speak in a language your heart forgot." He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "You might be right." Months later, the company expanded to Asia, thanks to Maya's insight and translations. Her mother proudly visited the office one day, wearing a neat uniform, tears in her eyes as she saw her daughter's nameplate on the door. "Look at you," she whispered, touching the plaque. "From sweeping floors to saving companies." Maya smiled and hugged her mother tightly. "No, Mom. You saved me first." As they stood together in that sunlit hallway, the same marble floor where Maya had once stood trembling, it was clear how far they'd come, and in that moment, something extraordinary happened. Richard stepped out of his office, paused, and nodded respectfully to both women. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was respect, genuine and earned. He turned to Maya and said, "We have another investor meeting next week. This time, in Japanese. You ready?" Maya grinned. "I've been studying." He laughed. "Of course you have." As they walked off, her mother looked at the office skyline, whispering a prayer of gratitude. The world that once mocked them now applauded them. The laughter that once humiliated her had turned into applause. Maya had proved something powerful, that no act of arrogance could silence a person who knows her worth. And as Richard watched her confidently lead another meeting weeks later, he thought back to that first day, when he'd mocked her, when he'd said, "If she translates, I'll give her mother my job." He smiled quietly to himself and whispered, "Thank God she did." Because that day, a young woman didn't just translate a language. She translated humanity, and changed a heart that thought it couldn't be moved anymore, and that was worth more than any deal he'd ever signed.